Imagine total chaos. On November the 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day, Lisbon was consumed by the worst natural disaster in its history. A devastating earthquake, followed by a tsunami and raging fires, turned the Portuguese capital into ruins within hours through a triple disaster of earthquake, tsunami, and fires. The devastation shook Europe so deeply that even thinkers like Voltaire began to question long-held beliefs about faith and the world. But the impact of this event extended far beyond Lisbon. The shockwaves reached Brazil, then a Portuguese colony, and pushed philosophers to question the nature of divinity and rationality. What caused this disaster, and how did it shape not only Portugal, but the entire world? Today, we will explore the deep consequences of this event, from its geological origins to the social and philosophical shifts it inspired. Stay with us until the end, when we'll reveal a fascinating fun fact: how Lisbon pioneered one of the earliest earthquake-resistant architectural designs, changing the way cities are built. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Armchair Archaeology for more stories from history's greatest events. Now, picture a peaceful morning in Lisbon. It's November 1st, 1755, All Saints' Day. The city's churches were filled with worshippers attending Mass. Suddenly, at 9:40 a.m., the ground beneath them heaved violently. The earthquake was so powerful, measuring between 8.5 and 9.0 on the Richter scale, that it didn't just shake buildings, it leveled them. Walls cracked, floors split open, and entire neighborhoods were reduced to rubble in minutes. But this was only the beginning. As survivors tried to flee the collapsing structures, many sought safety by rushing to Lisbon's docks, hoping the open space by the sea would protect them. Little did they know, they were heading toward even greater danger. About 40 minutes after the earthquake, a towering tsunami surged up the Tagus River. Waves as high as 20 meters crashed into Lisbon, turning streets into rivers and sweeping away everything: people, animals, and buildings alike. The tsunami's destruction was swift and unforgiving, wiping out entire sections of the city. To make matters worse, as people desperately tried to recover from the quake and flood, fires broke out across the city. Candles that had been lit for religious services, as well as kitchen fires, sparked raging infernos that consumed what little remained. These flames burned for days, completely erasing parts of Lisbon from existence. By the time the disaster subsided, an estimated 30,000 to 50,000 people had perished, and Lisbon was left in smoldering ruins. The disaster's effects extended well beyond the city, with damage reported from as far as Morocco and Spain, and tremors felt as far away as the Caribbean. What do you think? Could Lisbon have been better prepared for such a disaster? Let us know in the comments. So, what caused such a massive event? The Lisbon earthquake remains one of the most studied natural disasters in history, and geologists have pieced together much of its puzzle. Lisbon is located near a major fault line, known as the Azores-Gibraltar Transform Fault, a crack in the Earth's crust, where the African and Eurasian tectonic plates meet. These plates are in constant motion, though at a pace too slow for humans to notice. Over time, as the plates press against each other, enormous pressure builds up. Eventually, the tension becomes too much, and the plates shift suddenly, releasing massive amounts of energy. On that fateful morning of November the 1st, 1755, that pressure was released in the form of one of the most powerful earthquakes ever recorded. The earthquake's epicenter was located in the Atlantic Ocean, just off Portugal's southwestern coast. The rupture beneath the seafloor didn't just shake the land, it also displaced a huge volume of water, creating the colossal tsunami that devastated Lisbon and nearby coastal regions. The combination of violent ground shaking, widespread destruction, and the resulting tsunami made this disaster particularly lethal. The Lisbon earthquake occurred centuries before modern seismology, yet it triggered a wave of early scientific inquiry. Local officials were instructed to document their observations, which became one of the first systematic attempts to study earthquake impacts. These early efforts helped lay the groundwork for our modern understanding of tectonic activity and earthquake mechanics. Even though much of the science would take centuries to develop fully, the human toll of the Lisbon earthquake was catastrophic. In a city of around 200,000 people, it is estimated that between 30,000 and 50,000 lost their lives in just a few hours. Buildings collapsed almost instantly, trapping thousands of people under mountains of rubble. Lisbon's magnificent palaces, churches, and homes were no match for the force of the earthquake. Entire families were buried alive beneath what had been the bustling heart of the Portuguese Empire. The destruction was widespread, with no part of the city left untouched by the disaster. Those who survived the earthquake faced even more horrors. The tsunami that followed the quake engulfed the lower districts of the city, wiping out anyone who had sought refuge near the river. People clung desperately to debris, but the powerful waves swept them away, drowning many in the cold waters of the Tagus River. Bodies were found miles away from where they had been, testifying to the sheer force of the sea. Then, in the aftermath of the earthquake and the tsunami, fires ignited across the city. Lit candles from religious ceremonies and overturned cooking fires spread quickly through the wooden structures. With the city's infrastructure in shambles, there was no way to fight the flames, which consumed the remaining buildings for days. The once great city of Lisbon was reduced to ash and debris. The devastation didn't end at Lisbon's borders. Reports of tremors and damage poured in from across the Iberian Peninsula and beyond, with effects being felt as far away as Morocco and the Caribbean. For the survivors, the psychological scars of the disaster would last for generations. While Lisbon bore the brunt of the disaster, the effects of the earthquake rippled across the Atlantic Ocean to Brazil, then Portugal's largest colony. Though the physical damage was minimal compared to Lisbon, the tremors were felt in northeastern Brazil, including in Salvador, the colonial capital. Though no buildings collapsed, the experience left the Brazilian population shaken. Both literally and figuratively, many feared that such a disaster could strike their own lands. More significantly, the news of Lisbon's destruction had a profound emotional impact on the Brazilian elite. Brazil's upper class had close ties to Portugal, and many had family and business interests in Lisbon. The sight of their homeland in ruins deeply disturbed them, raising fears about the vulnerability of their own colony. Beyond the emotional shock, the earthquake had economic and political consequences for Brazil. The reconstruction of Lisbon required vast sums of money, and much of this financial burden fell on the colonies. To finance the rebuilding efforts, Portugal imposed heavier taxes on Brazil and increased the extraction of its resources, which led to growing discontent among the Brazilian elite. This economic strain only worsened the already tense relationship between the colony and the Portuguese crown. Over time, these tensions contributed to the development of a Brazilian identity that increasingly resented Portugal's exploitation. In this sense, the Lisbon earthquake indirectly sowed the seeds of Brazil's eventual independence. Though Brazil may not have experienced the full force of the earthquake, its aftershocks, both literal and metaphorical, were felt throughout the colony, leaving a lasting impact on its political future. In the wake of the earthquake, chaos reigned in Lisbon. But amidst the devastation, one man emerged as a decisive leader, Sebastião José de Carvalho y Melo, better known as the Marquis of Pombal. Appointed as the Prime Minister just a few years earlier, Pombal would go on to play a pivotal role in leading Portugal through one of its darkest moments. His response to the disaster was swift and, by many accounts, authoritarian. When asked what should be done, Pombal famously replied, "Bury the dead and feed the living." He immediately took control of the rescue and recovery efforts, organizing the removal of bodies to prevent the spread of disease and distributing food and water to survivors. His actions helped prevent further chaos and suffering in a city already on the brink. To restore order, Pombal imposed martial law across the city. Special courts were established to try and punish looters and those exploiting the disaster. His iron-fisted approach kept the city from descending into complete anarchy and set the stage for a more orderly recovery process. But Pombal didn't stop there. He saw the destruction of Lisbon not just as a tragedy, but as an opportunity to rebuild the city in line with the principles of the Enlightenment. He commissioned architects and engineers to design a modern city with wider streets, open squares, and buildings that could better withstand future earthquakes. Pombal's vision for Lisbon was groundbreaking, and his plans would turn the city into a symbol of resilience and progress. His actions following the earthquake consolidated his political power, allowing him to enact sweeping reforms that would reshape Portugal's political and economic landscape for years to come. Enjoying this deep dive into history? Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss an episode of Armchair Archaeology. Out of the ashes of destruction, a new Lisbon emerged. The city's reconstruction after the earthquake was not only a testament to the resilience of its people, but also a symbol of Enlightenment ideals of reason and progress. Sebastião José de Carvalho y Melo, the Marquis of Pombal, spearheaded this effort, and he made sure Lisbon would not only be rebuilt, but improved. One of the most revolutionary aspects of Lisbon's rebirth was its adoption of earthquake-resistant architecture, a forward-thinking innovation for the time. Pombal and his team of engineers designed what came to be known as the Pombaline cage, Gaiola Pombalina. This structure involved a hidden wooden framework built within the walls of buildings, designed to flex and absorb the shock of future earthquakes. This innovative technique was one of the earliest attempts at seismic-resistant construction in the world. Beyond architecture, Pombal completely redesigned the city's urban layout. The medieval maze of narrow streets was replaced by wide boulevards and open squares, which were easier to navigate and made it easier to manage fire hazards. These newly planned streets also facilitated better traffic flow and communication across the city. The Baixa district, one of the areas most heavily damaged in the earthquake, became the centerpiece of Lisbon's transformation. The grid-like layout and neoclassical buildings we see today in Baixa are direct results of this ambitious reconstruction plan. This reconstruction was not just about practicality, it was also about projecting Lisbon's strength and modernity to the world. Pombal's vision of a new Lisbon helped restore the city's place as a chaboisée, leading European capital, and demonstrated the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason, order, and progress in urban planning. The Lisbon earthquake didn't just devastate the city, it changed the world's understanding of natural disasters. This event became a turning point in the scientific study of earthquakes and tsunamis, marking the birth of modern seismology. At the time, the causes of earthquakes were poorly understood, and explanations often relied on religious interpretations. However, Lisbon's destruction triggered a new wave of scientific inquiry. One of the first systematic efforts to understand the disaster came directly from Portugal. Under Pombal's orders, a detailed survey of the damage was conducted. Local officials were tasked with answering questions about the intensity and effects of the quake, including where and when tremors were felt. These reports, known as the Pombal questionnaire, are considered one of the earliest attempts to study an earthquake scientifically. The data collected provided valuable insights into the nature of seismic events and laid the groundwork for future research. Across Europe, intellectuals and scientists took note. In particular, the tsunami that followed the earthquake fascinated scholars. Its far-reaching effects, reaching the coasts of North Africa, the Caribbean, and even Brazil, provided key data for studying the behavior of seismic waves and tsunamis. This global event sparked debates and encouraged the development of early theories about tectonic plate movements, though the full theory of plate tectonics wouldn't be formalized until centuries later. The Lisbon earthquake also inspired philosophical debates, questioning humanity's understanding of the natural world. For many, it highlighted the need to move away from religious explanations and toward empirical, scientific approaches to understanding nature. The earthquake, in a way, acted as a catalyst for the Enlightenment's emphasis on reason, science, and progress. The Lisbon earthquake didn't just shake the ground, it shook the foundations of European philosophy and religion. For a deeply Catholic country like Portugal, the destruction of a city during a religious holiday was seen by many as divine punishment. Priests and religious leaders across Europe delivered sermons interpreting the disaster as a sign of God's wrath, meant to humble a sinful people. However, this traditional explanation didn't sit well with everyone. The philosopher Voltaire famously critiqued this idea of a benevolent, all-powerful God allowing such horrors to occur. In his satirical novel Candide, Voltaire mocked the prevailing belief that all is for the best in the best of all possible worlds, a philosophy promoted by Leibniz. The scale of suffering caused by the earthquake seemed to contradict the notion of divine providence, pushing thinkers across Europe to question religious explanations for natural events. The disaster became a critical turning point in the Enlightenment's shift away from religious dogma and toward rational, scientific thought. It sparked debates over the nature of God, human suffering, and the role of reason in understanding the world. Philosophers like Voltaire and Immanuel Kant argued that the earthquake was a natural event, driven by forces that could be understood through science rather than an act of divine judgment. The Church's authority was also weakened in Portugal, as many began to question its role in society. Pombal used the earthquake as an opportunity to reduce the influence of the Inquisition and push through secular reforms. In this sense, the Lisbon earthquake was not just a natural disaster, it was a philosophical one, shaking the very foundations of religious and intellectual life in Europe. What's your take? Do you agree with Voltaire's critique of divine providence, or do you think there's more to the story? Comment below and share your thoughts. The political consequences of the Lisbon earthquake were profound, both within Portugal and throughout its empire. In the immediate aftermath, the destruction allowed Sebastião José de Carvalho y Melo, the Marquis of Pombal, to consolidate his political power. His decisive actions in managing the crisis earned him the trust of King José III, and Pombal quickly became the de facto ruler of Portugal. Pombal took advantage of the chaos to implement sweeping reforms that weakened the traditional power structures of the aristocracy and the Catholic Church. He believed that modernizing Portugal required a break from the past, and the earthquake provided the perfect opportunity to push through his vision of Enlightenment-inspired reforms. One of his most significant moves was to curtail the power of the Inquisition, which had long dominated Portugal's religious and intellectual life. He also reformed the country's economy, encouraging industrial development and reducing the influence of old noble families. However, Pombal's reforms weren't limited to Portugal itself. The colonies, particularly Brazil, felt the aftershocks of his policies. In order to finance Lisbon's reconstruction, Pombal increased taxes on Brazil and demanded more resources from the colony. This placed a heavy burden on the Brazilian economy and deepened resentment toward the Portuguese crown. Brazilian elites, already frustrated by what they saw as unfair exploitation, began to question their relationship with Portugal. The economic strain caused by Lisbon's reconstruction would contribute to the growing desire for independence in Brazil, planting the seeds for future revolts against colonial rule. Thus, the Lisbon earthquake reshaped Portugal's political landscape, both at home and abroad, strengthening Pombal's hand while sowing the seeds of discontent in its colonies. The Lisbon earthquake left an indelible mark on the collective memory of Portugal and the world. Even today, nearly 270 years later, the disaster is remembered as one of the most significant events in European history. It has become a symbol of human vulnerability in the face of nature's overwhelming power and continues to inspire reflection on the unpredictability of life. In Portugal, the earthquake is seen as a pivotal moment in the nation's history. The city of Lisbon itself bears the scars of the event, both physically and culturally. The ruins of the Carmo convent, partially destroyed by the earthquake and never fully rebuilt, stand as a permanent reminder of the destruction. Each year, on the anniversary of the earthquake, many in Portugal reflect on the disaster, its impact on their ancestors, and the resilience of their city in the face of such devastation. Beyond Portugal, the earthquake has also had a lasting influence on intellectual thought. The debates it sparked about religion, philosophy, and science helped shape the Enlightenment, influencing generations of thinkers and scholars. The earthquake also marked the beginning of modern disaster studies, as it was one of the first natural events to be systematically recorded and studied in detail. Ultimately, the legacy of the Lisbon earthquake extends far beyond the destruction it caused. It reshaped a city, a country, and the very way people understood the world. To this day, its echoes can still be felt in discussions about natural disasters, urban planning, and human resilience in the face of catastrophe. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Great Lisbon Earthquake, a disaster that shook the very foundations of Portugal and Europe's worldview. From the immense loss of life to the philosophical shifts that fueled the Enlightenment, the legacy of this event is vast. But as we promised at the beginning, here's the fascinating fun fact. Lisbon's reconstruction introduced one of the world's first earthquake-resistant designs, known as the Pombaline cage. These wooden frameworks were hidden within the walls of buildings, allowing structures to flex and absorb shock waves from future tremors, an ingenious solution for its time. This method became a crucial innovation in urban planning and set a precedent for modern seismic architecture. If you found this journey through history enlightening, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to Armchair Archaeology for more captivating stories. Don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay updated on our latest explorations. What historical events should we explore next? Let us know in the comments below. Until our next discovery, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep the flame of curiosity alive.